Good afternoon. It's about 4 o'clock, so we'll make a start. There are very few of you joining us this afternoon, probably because it is supposed to be half term, so thank you for joining us. But I imagine we'll keep this very short and sweet, and I don't have an awful lot to say. What that does mean is if you have any particular questions or issues, then certainly we can delve into those in more depth than we usually would and explore those in more detail. My colleague Mike is on this chat. He'll be monitoring the chat function today as usual. So if you do have any comments, then please do post on the chat and Mike will ask. But as there are so few of us equally, if you just want to unmute your mic and interrupt me at any point, please feel free to do that, and we'll keep it very, very informal in that way. So really, I'm just going to focus on two things this afternoon. The first is the advice that came out on Tuesday from the DfE about secondary school reopenings in particular. I think looking at the names on the chat, I think everyone is secondary based, so I apologise that's not right, but I can talk about the primary if that's helpful. And then also just the Ofqual consultation that came out last Friday, obviously after the policy update I did this time last week. So school reopenings. So what does the DfE advice tell us? Well, the advice in terms of who should be coming back remains the same. So it is still the ambition that we have year 10s and year 12s back for some face-to-face contact with their teachers before the summer holidays. Now, the initial proposal is that would start from the 1st of June. That's been pushed back 2 weeks to the 15th of June, as I'm sure you're aware. And at any one time in school, you should only have 25% of those cohorts of your year 10 and your 12 in at any one time. And that is in addition to the current students, i.e. vulnerable students and students of key workers who currently have the school open to the whole time. So that's in addition to those students. So 25% of students at any one time. What the DfE has said is, unlike primary schools, there is a lot of flexibility for schools to decide on how they do this. So it's up to you to decide how you prioritise certain students, where you have certain students in more frequently. For example, students that may have missed more learning than other students. How you arrange that is up to you. So there's a lot of room for local flexibility and local interpretation, which in one way is obviously very welcome. On the other hand, that creates a lot of work for all of you who need to decide what you're going to do with that. I had previously said on these updates that rotas would not be allowed when schools reopened. That remains the case for primary schools, and that's what we were going off when we talked about that. But the advice that is specifically for secondary schools says that rotas not only can be used, but should be used because of that 25% rule. However, what they do say is that split day rotas should be avoided, so not having a morning and an afternoon, but instead it should be done on a daily or weekly basis. So rotas are not only allowed, but they're encouraged, but they shouldn't be on a daily basis. One of the key concerns about getting students back to school is how they get there, particularly if you're a rural school, and public transport has been suggested to be avoided, which we know will be a real challenge for many schools. As such, schools are encouraged to have staggered start and end times so that you have students coming in at different times to reduce congestion around the school and for parking if parents are driving students in rather than using public transport. And then on top of all of this is all the general rules around safety and precautions. So cleaning the school more regularly, giving staff who are involved in intimate care or involved with students who can't socially distance, PPE equipment, observing social distancing as much as possible. And so all of those rules are obviously still in play when year 10s and 12s get back on the 15th. One consideration to make is if you are in a PFI building and the stage, the independent group of scientists have said that PFI buildings have got a particular challenge ahead of them because, of course, you don't have access to the building outside of school time. So there's additional cleans that you might need. Those staggered start and end times that would be very helpful might not be able to be put into place. And so that's certainly an issue to consider if you do have PFI, and it might be worth talking to your to the site's owners about the possibility of greater access, for example, cleaning and so on. So last Friday, Ofqual released their response to the consultation on general qualifications and launched a new qualification on the autumn series. In terms of this summer, there was very little in there that we didn't expect or we didn't know. And I sent out information about this last week, and there was a blog in the Sunday supplement, which hopefully you'll manage to read. But just to quickly reiterate the key points from that response. So the standardisation, which will happen at a national level, done by the exam board with a methodology agreed by Ofqual, will take into account your school's previous results, but not your trajectories. And this was the kind of key point. Lots of schools have told us that you're expecting significantly better results this year, but or that you've seen a steady rise in previous years. That won't count, unfortunately. So it will take account of your previous results. There is no chance for appeal about this, or to make your case about why you feel your results would have gone up. And Ofqual acknowledge a number of reasons why results would have gone up. For example, a new teacher, the fact that this year Ramadan doesn't cross over as much into the exam period as the last 2 years have done, all sorts of reasons, but they just say there's no fair way in which they could offer that. So essentially, if you genuinely were expecting better results, unfortunately, that won't factor in into the formula. As I mentioned last week, that standardisation will take place at a subject level. So what that means is it's not about the scores, it's not about your attainment rate mark, it's about the attainment within that particular subject. And so obviously the formula will be more sensitive for smaller subjects where you do expect to see a bigger swing each year. But also it's not about the student, so it's not at a student level. So what we're not expecting to see is that individual students, based on their Key Stage 2 results, get a certain GCSE based on your previous results. So it's about the whole cohort. And as a result of that, as I said time and time again, the rank is really king. When the portals open up next week, when submission opens up from the different examples next week, the key thing that really I think heads of the department should be focused on is the rank correct? By this point, I imagine most of you will have had your teacher assessment grades in, your central assessed grades in. So at this point, it really is that rank correct? Because the teacher assessment grades may go up and down, the rank will remain the same. And again, pay particular attention to the students at the bottom and the top of each rank. What Ofqual has said is that if you are including private candidates, because you have enough evidence to include them in your, to give them the central assessed grade and include them in your rank, then they will not affect your on-roll students' grades. And I know this is a real concern for some schools, where they were saying, well, we're taking private candidates who might be year 14 returners or adults linked to the school or so on. And some schools thought, well, if we put them into the rank, it's going to disadvantage our actual students. Ofqual has said the formula will be nuanced enough to not disadvantage your students. We don't yet have the formula, so we don't know what that means. Personally, I can't quite understand that because, I mean, surely if you put a private candidate as number 1 in a rank for a, let's say, grade 5 in English GCSE, then surely that's going to impact the students above and below them. But we will have to wait to see the detail on that. But I think the reassurance there from Ofqual is that if you do have private candidates and you do have enough evidence to give them that grade and include them, then you should. and you shouldn't worry about how it might affect your on-law students. So in terms of that lack of appeal process, that happens at the school level where you can't appeal based on any upward trajectory that you're expecting to see this year, but it also applies at a individual student level. And quite frankly, the kind of reasons why a student could appeal this summer are very, very limited. It's essentially if the data that you submitted as a school was used incorrectly, as in it sort of became corrupted. They can't appeal the process, they can't appeal the centre assessed grade, and they can't appeal their final mark if the data that you submitted was used correctly. And therefore, the general sense from Ofqual is that the default answer is always sit the exams in the autumn. Remember, the ambition is for A-levels to be sat in the October and for GCSEs to be sat in November, with results for A-levels published before Christmas and results for GCSE published by February. So the general advice for students that aren't happy with the grade they have is that there is no real opportunity to appeal. It's just to sit those exams in the autumn or indeed in summer 2021. And sort of underlying all of this, you could get very bogged down in this and think, well, the standardization formula is all about subject levels. So we should look at our subjects in the previous years and reach an average and all this sort of stuff. And yes, that's useful to some extent. And as senior leaders on this call, I'm sure you'll be looking at individual subjects and looking at how realistic their grades are. And those previous results do give an indication. The transition matrices do give an indication of what students are likely to achieve based on the statistics on averages. But don't overthink that, basically. If genuinely you were expecting better results, hand on heart, with your students this year, then enter those. That's what you're being asked to do. You're being asked to say what you really think students would have achieved in those exams. But at the same time, manage staff expectations and be saying to staff, that's what we want you to do. We don't want you to second guess the data. Tell us what you think these students would have got. But at the same time, say to staff that just because of our previous performance, we may be marked down or indeed up if you're predicting lower grades than in the previous 2 years. So I think it's important to focus on what you're being asked to do, but equally to manage expectations of staff and of governors. And of course, what I haven't said there is to manage expectations of students and parents, because of course, you absolutely must not say the centre assessed grades or the rank order to students or parents at this time, and to do so is considered exam malpractice according to Ofqual. So that's all of my updates. There's only a very few of us. I saw that we have one comment in which I asked Mike to read out in a moment. But if people do have any other comments, either please do type those in the chat function or unmute yourself after Mike has spoken. Mike, have we got the comment that came in?
Well, the comment was actually from me. It was just linking. It was just linking to the blog that he was talking about for everybody.
Has anyone got any comments or queries or questions or concerns? It's fine if not. We're all busy people, and it is technically your holiday, so I'm happy to end quickly if we need to.
Hi, Tom. I've got one question. It's David here. I've read the guidance and we were looking at trying to get some FaceTime before the end of the summer term with our year 11s who have left and might be coming to our sixth form, and trying to assess their readiness for sixth form either with us or moving on to other sixth forms and colleges and wanting to do some of those interviews face-to-face on site. I don't think, having read the guidance, that it allows for that. And I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on that.
No, David, you're absolutely right. I think the guidance doesn't allow for that. So within that flexibility in the third bullet point I talked about there, that's around flexibility about the year 10s and year 12s. you should, you are not allowed currently to bring back any other year groups. Quite frankly, I don't see a way around that. Yeah, I think the only way you can do that is virtually. I assume we've had a couple of comments in. I don't know if that's related to that, but I think I agree with you based on my reading of the guidance that's not a possibility. Mike, has anyone kind of commented on that particularly?
So the comment that's just come in is actually asking for confirmation on the split day guidance for secondaries.
Right. Okay. So essentially, what the document that came out on Tuesday said is rotas. You have to do rota because you only have 25% of year 10 and year 12 in, plus the students you would have coming in. But the rota should only be done on a daily basis, not on a split day basis. So you can have, for example, you could have 25% of students in on Monday to Thursday, 1 day each. What you can't do is morning and afternoon, which is not the same for primary. For primary, from Monday, when they have, in theory, reception year 1, year 6 in, they have to have all the students in all the time, and rotas are not allowed. So we've got a bit more flexibility as secondaries. Yep.
Okay, and off the back of that, is there any reference to staff being able to do split days?
So in terms of staffing and staff rotas, yes, that remains entirely up to you as a school. So that doesn't apply to staffing. Obviously, you will have particular contracts in place, and it depends on the contracts you have. But in terms of whatever arrangements you currently have around rota systems, for example, I mean, certainly at the start of lockdown, what a lot of schools were doing, and I think has continued, is a 1 week on-site, 1 week off-site, doing home learning, 1 week holiday. If you're still continuing that sort of rota, that's absolutely fine. That's your prerogative. There's nothing in the guidance about that. And therefore we can assume that applies to half days as well. So if you have staff working half days, that's absolutely fine. I think what it is worth bearing in mind though, in terms of staffing, is the document also says is that the expectation is that for a majority of all students, including year 10s and 12s, that a majority of their learning will continue to be virtual. So I don't think from a staff perspective, the reopening from the 15th of June should be seen as a way of bringing a lot more staff back into school, which again, it comes back to that rota and how you tie or how you marry up the students you have coming in on one day and the staff that you have in. Now, the guidance doesn't say it has to be students' own teaching staff. And I think to do that would be very, very difficult. But of course, the idea, the rationale behind it and what the guidance says is, it is about those exam classes, year 10 and 12, seeing their own teachers face to face. So as much as possible, and this is, I suppose, a challenge over the next 2 weeks, is to say, well, how can we get 25% of students in and see their teachers face to face? Or do you say, actually, they're just going to see the head of department and they're going to be the ones that lead the lesson? But I think the key point there, sort of to return to where I started, is that we shouldn't see this as lots of staff coming back into school. That the DfE are very clear that for secondaries, even for year 10 and 12, the main vehicle for delivery is online.
Okay. Thank you for your help on that one, Tom. Just had a comment in. And then we've had a couple more questions coming in. Guidance on year 6 transition also seems to suggest that face-to-face transition won't be possible. Have I understood this correctly?
You say won't be possible, Mike?
Won't be possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's certainly not going to be possible. What the DfE haven't said, and one of the questions that we have asked, is given that year 6 is in theory going back next week, the involvement that secondaries could have in that. So, for example, taking year 7 teachers to local feeder primaries. Now, of course, so the DfE have no rules on that. There is no guidance on that. Whether or not you choose to do that will entirely depend on your particular context, how feasible that is, whether or not you can have year 7 teachers, year 7 tutors travelling to all of your feeder primary schools without using public transport will really, really depend on your context. So there is no guidance about that. And the general view, and certainly speaking to lots of heads over the last 2 weeks, is that a lot of schools are not doing in-person transition days.
Okay, next question is, so if a student isn't happy with their mark, do they only have the opportunity to have a written exam resit, or can they do practical elements if they are externally assessed?
So this would really only apply to BTECs. Please, whoever asked that question, comment if I'm misinterpreting your question. Would only apply to BTEC.
Drama GCSE as well. Sorry, it's me again.
Yeah.
A drama GCSE. So we do an external text and practice exam, and then the written exam. And I just wonder whether they can go because we haven't got to the external practical.
Yeah, thank you. You anticipated my question exactly. I was going to say, and a handful of general, including drama and art and technology. Good question. My gut feeling is no. I think that it will just be the written exam element that can be sat in the autumn. But that's a good question. I've got a call with the exam board tomorrow, which I will pick that up with and let you know directly. But based on what Ofqual has said and based on my conversation with exam boards this week, it will just be the written qualifications, I think. And the way it's being applied to BTEC, which I imagine will be the same methodology they apply, is that where there are non-exam based assessment, then they stick with the teacher mark for the autumn series. So I suppose the other option would be to enter them in the summer 2021 series, in which case a non-exam based assessment could go ahead as planned, but I would double check that and let you know. Mike, any?
That's all the questions that we've had up to now.
Lovely. Well, it is your half term. I'm sure, well, the fact you're on here means that you are all working, and certainly here in East London, it's a sunny afternoon. So in that case, I will let you get back to either work or enjoying the sunshine. But have a good rest of the week and have a good weekend. And hope that you're all staying safe and healthy. Thank you.